history people. There have been some requests for more Wesley, so he's here as well. Say hi, history people.
Hey, history people.
Yay. We've been away, and now we're back at home.
Yay!
Okay. So listen, normally I don't do a lecture for this assignment. I have a textbook assignment for this. But because we don't have the textbook, and it's an old textbook that I use, I don't think I can find the exact textbook. So we're going to just outline today some of the important things that we need to know from this textbook assignment. What we are going to be discussing today is World War II at home, meaning not Wesley's house, but the United States, okay? So we're going to be talking about some of the effects that it had on the United States. First of all, we're going to talk about just some terms. These are terms that will pop up on your test, so be careful, okay? Listen carefully. You can use this to always go back and listen to because it's on video, so you can go back and listen to it. So lots of things, of course, after Pearl Harbor happened, lots of people were very upset, okay? We went from wanting to stay completely out of the war to everybody was ready to jump in. I mean, because it all of a sudden became personal. So we could no longer pretend that the war didn't affect us in any way. Okay, so, kind of like in World War I, when all of a sudden we get a threat from Mexico, now we've gotten attacked, and we've had, as close as 2,000 people die in Hawaii. Our whole Pacific Fleet is wiped out, so people are ready. And I remember my grandpa talking about Pearl Harbor and how deeply it affected everyone in the United States. And he used to talk about, say some not so nice things about the Japanese, but it really made the Japanese very upset. One of the things that America did was to take the Japanese Americans and put them into internment camps. It was called Manzanar, and it was in California because that's where most of the Japanese Americans lived. And so we actually put the Japanese in internment camps. And again, we're going to talk about this later in our final World War II notes, all right? So we'll talk about Manzanar, but it was something that happened because Roosevelt said it was a national security risk that perhaps the Japanese Americans would give secrets to the Japanese now that we're at war with them, okay? So it was a pretty big thing, and it affected the people in America, and everybody ran to enlist, and not only did people run to enlist, but people were drafted into the war as well. Okay, not just men were drafted, but women too, all right? There is something called WAC, and it is spelled W-A-A-C, okay? And it stands for the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, all right? And this was an important thing that women were now allowed to enlist in the military service. And they did a little bit more than just, nurses and secretaries. There were deliverers and people who would drive people around and all kinds of stuff. So women played a pretty big role in the war. In fact, they worked as nurses, ambulance drivers, radio operators, electricians, and pilots. Okay, I'm going to say those one more time because those are the kinds of things I'll ask you on your test. Nurses, ambulance drivers, radio operators, electricians, and pilots. Okay? All right, we're going, again, I'm reading this from a worksheet because normally I would have you be reading it and then filling it out. Okay? All right. There were many people who joined the military, including African Americans and Mexicans, also Mexican Americans. And they, again, this was still segregated fighting. They were not included in white military units. Okay, they had their own separate, but for the first time in American history, black African American men were allowed to become officers. And there were pilots, and they were called the Tuskegee Airmen, and they're pretty famous, and you probably heard of them. In fact, if any of you watched Trump's State of the Union, he had a man who was like 100 years old, and he stood up in the State of the Union address, and he was one of the original Tuskegee Airmen, which is pretty amazing. Okay. It says more than 13,000 Chinese Americans also joined the forces. In addition, there were 33,000 Japanese Americans that did fight, despite the fact that we thought of them as a military risk. Now, a lot of them were used as interpreters and things to help during the war, spies even, okay, or interceptors of messages and things like that. Okay, 25,000 Native Americans also enlisted in the armed services, including about 800 Native American women. Okay. Our factories were definitely affected. Okay. In early 1942, American newspapers reported the end of the automobile production, for example. The last car to roll off the assembly line was a gray sedan, and then they called it with victory trim on it, okay? Because what they were doing then with all the factories is turning them into places to build tanks, machine guns, all of the things, airplanes, things that we needed for the war, okay? I'm trying not to just read this to you. When the war began, defense contractors warned that selective service system, the nation did not have enough workers to meet both its military and industrial needs because there were 18 million laboring in the war industries. So more than 6 million of the people who went to work were women. Now, if you notice, in my classroom, kind of over by my desk, I have a picture of Rosie the Riveter. She is propaganda that was put out by the American government to try to encourage women during World War II to go to work in the factories. And, you know, the theme is we can do it, okay, because that was supposed to encourage women to go to war, okay? She's one of my favorite though, because I just like the theme that women can do anything that they want to do. So I kind of take on my historical perspective of Rosie the Riveter. Okay, now the same year that all of this new production is going on, we also see a step up in scientific development. Okay, so in 1941, Roosevelt actually created the Office of the Scientific Research and Development, and this was to bring scientists into the war effort. And we call this the OSRD. Okay, OSRD, again, standing for the Office of Scientific Research and Development. Now, I'm putting that out there so that you guys can go back there and know what OSRD, because that's going to be on your test. Promise. Okay, now, there are several things that the Office of Scientific Research and Development made. Some of these included things like radar, okay, sonar, so we could detect those U-boats, pesticides, okay, and penicillin. That's a big one, okay. All those boys getting shot, all those boys getting bullets thrown at them, they need immediate relief, and penicillin, that's your antibiotics, folks, and that's an important one to help make people feel better and be able to recover quickly. So these are some of the things that we need to talk about here. Okay, now one of the big ones here, the development, the most important development of the OSRD might be considered the atomic bomb. Okay, now we're going to talk a lot more about the atomic bomb and the Manhattan Project in our last set of notes, but just for this point of view, understand that at this point in time, understand that the Office of Scientific Research and Development did help to create the atomic bomb. Okay, now it was said that the Germans were had also achieved this kind of atomic reaction, And it was actually Albert Einstein, who did not create the bomb, but was aware of what was going on, who wrote Roosevelt a letter and said, listen, the Germans are on this. If we don't get on this, they could develop this weapon like you've never seen before. And if the Germans develop this weapon first, it's over. Okay, we can't let this happen. So we got to get on it first. So Einstein wrote Roosevelt that letter, and Roosevelt responded by creating an advisory committee on uranium to help this new discovery come along. Okay, they believed it would take 3 to 5 years to build this. And this became known as a codename Manhattan Project. It ended up not taking 3 to 5 years to build this, which is pretty fabulous, okay? It got done a lot quicker than that, and the Germans were not able to finally fill in the missing pieces that they needed to be able to create that bomb, and we were the only ones that did, which... thank goodness, right? We didn't want the Nazis to have an atomic bomb, or that could be really bad. Of course, at the end of the war, it's going to be a race of can we keep this a secret, and it's not going to be about the Nazis, but about the Soviets, because they're going to be our new enemy. Okay, right now we're on their side. After World War II, after we kill Hitler, that is not going to be the case. Okay. They also put some economic things in place. We're not going to talk too much about that. The OPA was the Office of Price Administration to fight inflation, freezing prices, to make sure things didn't go too crazy. What I want you guys to know about the whole economics of World War II is understand, number one, we were in the middle of the Great Depression. Okay, it is going to be World War II that will get America out of the Great Depression, right? Because what it does is create more jobs than ever before. Okay, so while there were no jobs, now we're at war, and now we have all kinds of jobs, to the point where they're dragging women who don't normally work outside of the home at this point in time to go work in this office or to go work in the factories to help make war supplies. Things got tight, and people were asked to sacrifice. I know I mentioned to you guys before about my mom's draft card. Okay, she had a draft card, or not a draft card, I'm sorry, but oh, no, I can't think of it. Like stamp card, and they would give so many rations. There we go. Okay, a ration card, and they would give each family member in a household so many rations in this book, and you could go to the store and you'd have some for flour and you'd have some for bread, and once your stamps were out, that's all your family got. Okay, now again, my mom was born in 1944, so it was like the last year before the end of the war. Okay, the war's over in 45, so even little infants had one, and the more kids you had, the more rations you had, because you had to feed your family. But then there were lots of luxury goods that were simply not available. When we watched Schindler's List, we talked a lot about this. You know, Schindler had to get all his things on the black market, all those luxury goods, things like nylon, that was considered a luxury good because, you know, they would use those for parachutes and tents and things in the war. Everything was used for that. Okay, so it wasn't something that regular citizens could get. They had to sacrifice. But again, put this in perspective. It was the middle of the Great Depression, okay? So people were pretty used to going without. So to ask the American people to sacrifice luxury goods, this wasn't a great shock to most Americans, because they were pretty used to sacrificing and not having the access to the things that they normally would have. Okay, so economically, just kind of understand that. Again, I'm going to put some of this stuff on a worksheet for you. I'm not going to post that tonight, but look for that tomorrow, okay? That you will have a worksheet to go along with this video. So I'm recording this on Thursday. The worksheet I will assign tomorrow, and it will be due on Monday. Okay, hang in there, guys. If you would like to get together on a Google Hangout, I can do that. Okay, I have to learn how to do it, because I'm learning all this new technology, doing this stuff remotely from home. I've been on these Google Hangouts, but I'm not sure how to set up a meeting to all of you. So I'm going to ask around about that, and I will certainly email you all or post on Google Classroom when we will have that. But it will be an opportunity for you to get on and ask me any questions that you have, how to catch up with me or whatever. I'm trying to stay up on my email. I've never been very good at email, but I'm trying to stay up on it a little bit better so that any questions that you guys have, that I'm answering those immediately. But again, I'll try to get a Google Hangout, and once I get the hang of that, I'll post a regular hour to have that, and we can have these discussions. It won't be required, but it can be something that if you do want to join for, you know, the 20 minutes or whatever, I'll be available for that, okay? And I'll let you guys know. You guys rock, stay safe, and hopefully we'll be back in the classroom soon. All right, again, tomorrow, that will be Friday, look for a little bit of an assignment to go along with this lecture. You guys rock. Thanks. Bye.